It's 5 in the morning at the happiest place on earth. The park is completely empty except for this one area cordoned off near Sleeping Beauty's castle. There is a massive, multi-tiered wedding cake, a live orchestra literally tuning their instruments in the pre-dawn chill, and a bride who can barely stand up because 4-inch heels have literally been taped to her feet, and she is 9 years old.
You absolutely have to stick around until the very end of this episode to hear the unbelievable resolution to this case, because the person who ultimately stops this nightmare isn't the police, and they aren't even supposed to be in the park.
We are Mike and Abby, and welcome to Wild Crime Podcasts. We are officially done with boring, slow-burn true crime. We're tearing into the most baffling cases on Earth, untangling the lies, and dropping you right in the middle of the madness.
Whether you were on a long drive, crushing a workout, or just feeling a little bored, we're here to walk you through the mystery and make your next hour incredibly thrilling.
Because, that visual alone, the castle, the orchestra, a 9-year-old struggling to stand it, is pure nightmare fuel. But it kind of pales in comparison to the sheer scale of the financial deception required to actually buy out a Disney castle in the first place.
Right, the logistics are just staggering here.
Yeah.
We are talking about Saturday, June 21st, 2025, and the location is Disneyland Paris. Which, it's not just a theme park. It is a highly secure, heavily fortified corporate compound.
Yeah, they have layers of security. It's not a public park.
Exactly. And this event is scheduled for a very, very specific window between 5 in the morning and 7 in the morning, so pre-dawn. To get that exclusive window, to have the park entirely to yourself with the castle as your personal backdrop, the venue cost was roughly $150,000.
Which is about 130,000 euros. I cannot get past that number, because how does a production of this magnitude happen without anyone flagging it? Like, you don't just drop a bag of cash on Mickey Mouse's desk and say, I need the castle at 5 in the morning.
You don't. But that price tag is actually the key to understanding the psychology of this entire operation. Because we usually think of security as, like, metal detectors, right?
Right, bag checks, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But in the corporate world, extreme wealth functions as a sort of social anesthetic. When someone drops $150,000 for a 2-hour rental, the event planners on the corporate side, they just naturally assume legitimacy. The money creates this halo effect of compliance.
But wait, even with the money, I'm stuck on the mechanics of the transaction itself. Wiring that much money from a private account to a French megacorporation, that has to trigger anti-money laundering alerts, right? Under EU banking laws. There has to be a massive paper trail.
There absolutely does. And that is exactly where the perpetrator built this incredibly sophisticated corporate facade. He presented himself to Disney as a 22-year-old Latvian national.
22. And he has that kind of money.
That's what he claimed. And he didn't just give them a fake name. He supplied forged identification documents, professional production contracts, and financial routing information that was good enough to pass that initial administrative layer of corporate security.
So he just fed the bureaucracy exactly what it wanted to see.
Precisely. He knew what paperwork they needed to rubber stamp the approval, and he manufactured it.
But even with the paperwork, how do you justify the event? A wedding at 5 in the morning with a 9-year-old.
Well, his cover story was that this was a high-profile social media stunt or a professional film shoot.
Oh, wow. Okay, I hate to admit it, but that is actually a really smart piece of misdirection. Because if you tell an event coordinator today that you're some eccentric influencer shooting a viral video, all the weird requests suddenly just seem like standard influencer behavior.
Exactly. The film shoot cover story gives immediate, logical framework for the secrecy, the bizarre hours, the heavy camera equipment.
Yeah.
But, he still had a massive problem. He had to physically interact with the venue staff, which presents a huge risk of facial recognition.
Right, because he's supposed to be 22.
Right. So to mitigate that, he utilized professional theatrical-grade makeup.
Wait, what? Like prosthetics?
Severe contouring, shading, structural alteration techniques. He completely obscured his real facial geometry. He literally constructed an illusion of youth and wore it as a physical mask.
That is insane. But okay, an illusion on that scale, a fake film shoot, it requires an audience. You can't just have a guy in heavy theatrical makeup standing next to a child in front of an empty castle. The Disney staff working the perimeter would instantly know something was wrong.
Yes, which brings us to the logistics of the attendees. To normalize this scene, he had to manufacture an entire social ecosystem. There were roughly 300 people on site.
300 at 5 in the morning.
Yes. And about 100 of those were hired extras who were bussed in from Paris in the middle of the night.
See, think about the mechanics of sourcing those people. You can't just put an ad in the paper saying, hey, need a crowd for a fake wedding. How did he recruit 100 people without someone calling the cops?
He used standard online casting platforms, gig workers, aspiring actors, and the casting call was specifically structured to mask the anomaly. It asked for 200 adults and 100 children between the ages of 5 and 15.
Oh, so he surrounded her with other kids?
Exactly. The stated purpose of the gig was a wedding rehearsal. By surrounding the 9-year-old bride with 100 other children, he created statistical camouflage. It normalized her presence.
If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. Would you have noticed these red flags if you were just hired as an extra for a film shoot? Or would the Disney setting make you blindly trust the situation? Because honestly, put yourself in the shoes of those adult extras. You step off a bus at 4 in the morning, you're exhausted, you see massive lighting rigs, a live orchestra, the iconic castle. Your brain is immediately going to process this as a legitimate, high-budget movie set.
It is a textbook demonstration of the bystander effect, but it's magnified by the psychological weight of environmental authority. When human beings are placed in a highly structured setting, especially one controlled by a megacorporation, their critical thinking protocols effectively shut down.
Yeah, diffusion of responsibility.
Right, an extra might see the little girl in the dress, feel a flicker of unease, but they instantly rationalize it. They think, well, Disney reps are standing right there. The camera crew is here. This has clearly been vetted by people way above my pay grade.
We'll get to the psychological fallout of the adults involved in a second, but first, you have to hear about the rogue operative who blew this entire criminal fantasy wide open. Because amidst those 300 compliant people, there was one guy whose instincts just refused to be muted.
Yes. His name is Vitalius, and he is a former Russian paratrooper.
A paratrooper? You cannot make this up.
You really can't. Vitalius was hired through that exact same online casting call. But he was given a highly specific role. He was cast to play the father of the bride.
Okay, so he takes the job, assuming it's just a standard acting gig. But the timeline here is incredibly compressed. He receives the final details of the shoot just hours before the event is supposed to kick off. And it's in those final hours that he discovers the actual age of the bride he's supposed to be giving away on camera.
He realizes she isn't a teenager playing younger. She is literally a 9-year-old child. And for a trained military operative like Vitalius, that information bypasses all social conditioning.
Right, his situational awareness triggers a hard stop.
It's exactly. While a civilian might rationalize it away to avoid making a scene, his training dictates a completely different response. He immediately backed out of the job and refuses to participate.
But he doesn't just stay in his hotel room. And this is where the story shifts from, like, a bizarre corporate deception into a high-stakes physical infiltration. Vitalis travels to Disneyland Paris in the dark. He does not have a park ticket. He gave up his vendor pass when he backed out. He has zero authorization to be anywhere near that property.
The physical capability required to infiltrate a closed major theme park is substantial. These environments have perimeter fences, sensor grids, roving security patrols. Vitalis had to navigate an unfamiliar topography in the pre-dawn hours, evade the outer security rings, and breach the cordoned-off event space without triggering an alarm.
And he's doing all of this with a massive handicap. He does not speak English, and he does not speak French.
Not at all.
He is in a foreign country, actively trespassing on private property to stop a crime in progress, and if a guard catches him, he literally cannot verbally communicate why he is there.
Because of the language barrier, he has to rely on a completely analog method of communication. He brings a handwritten note. He bypasses the immediate crowd of extras, gets directly into the sightline of a legitimate Disney cast member working the perimeter, and physically forces this piece of paper into their hands.
The note simply reads, "This is not a real wedding. The girl is 9 years old."
It's just a profound act of intervention. He shattered the diffusion of responsibility, he broke through the physical barriers, bypassed the language barrier, and injected a terrifying truth directly into the corporate bloodstream.
Pause for a second and ask yourself, what will you do in that exact scenario? If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. Would you have risked trespassing and arrest in a foreign country to deliver a handwritten warning? Because the bravery of that paratrooper is incredible, but it leads directly to a confrontation that is purely chaotic. We're about to watch this million-dollar lie collapse in real time.
And the timing is critical here. Even before Vitalis handed over that note, the human element of the event was already failing. The The paperwork was perfect, the lighting was perfect, but you cannot forge a genuine biological response. The Disney staff on the ground were already experiencing intense cognitive dissonance.
Because the little girl was visibly terrified.
Yes, she was disoriented, she was crying, and she was physically struggling to walk.
Because, this is the detail that just makes me sick, they had literally used tape to secure adult foreign shields to her feet. That is the physical anomaly that breaks the matrix. You can fake a contract, but you cannot fake the physical agony of a child stumbling in taped-on adult shoes.
That is the catalyst. When the Disney cast member reads the Tellus's note, confirming that this distressed child is only 9 years old, the underlying unease instantly converts into absolute panic. The corporate liability, the ethical horror, it all hits them at once.
And Disney's reaction is instantaneous. They do not pause to consult legal or ask for a refund. They shut the entire production down on the spot. The orchestra is abruptly silenced. The extras are left standing in utter confusion. And the staff immediately contacts the French police.
Given the nature of the emergency of potential crime involving a minor at a high-profile tourist destination, the police response is overwhelming. Authorities descend on Sleeping Beauty's castle within minutes.
They secure the area and detain 4 key individuals on site. They arrest the supposed 22-year-old Groom, who is still wearing his theatrical makeup. They detain a 24-year-old Latvian woman who had facilitated the casting call and was playing the sister. A 55-year-old Latvian man who was managing the coordination. And then, most horrifyingly, they detain the child's 41-year-old Ukrainian mother.
Before we get into the police investigation, we need to pause the timeline and examine the psychological architecture of the man who funded this. We have to dissect the mindset of the groom. The fundamental drivers here are extreme narcissism and a catastrophic level of hubris.
Yeah, it goes back to that $150,000 price tag. He operated under the delusion that wealth buys an alternate reality.
Precisely. He assumed that extreme wealth could manufacture absolute compliance. He believed he could purchase silence, obedience, and a private space where ethical boundaries just didn't exist. In his mind, the staff, the extras, even the castle itself, they were just inanimate props assigned to execute his script.
But the architecture of his plan contained a massive, fatal flaw. He made a devastating miscalculation regarding fundamental human empathy.
Right. His narcissism completely blinded him to biological reality. You cannot tape adult heels to a frightened 9-year-old, parade her in the freezing air in front of hundreds of people, and expect the environment to remain sterile and compliant.
He assumed a paycheck would override a bystander's visceral reaction to a child in pain.
He believed his forged permits were more powerful than a child's distress. He failed to account for the inherent empathy of the staff and the moral absolute of the paratrooper. His belief in his own untouchability is exactly what dismantled his operation.
We'll get into the actual terrifying criminal history of the groom in a minute, but first you have to hear the absolutely sickening lie the mother told the police to justify this. Because as the police start separating the suspects, the focus shifts to this 41-year-old mother.
The investigators established a terrifying timeline. The mother and the 9-year-old girl had arrived in France from Ukraine a mere 2 days before the scheduled event.
48 hours. Within 48 hours of crossing an international border, her daughter is standing in a cordoned-off theme park wearing a wedding dress. And when the French investigators sit the mother down and ask her how she justifies this, she offers a defense that is just a masterclass in psychological deflection.
She tells the police that she simply wanted her daughter to, quote, feel like a Disney princess for a day.
How does a parent construct a mental framework where a mock marriage to an adult male in an empty theme park equates to a princess fantasy? I know half of you driving right now are screaming at your podcast app, wondering why nobody called the cops on the mother earlier. I totally get it. If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. How does a parent possibly rationalize putting their child in this kind of danger for a quote-unquote princess day?
While the mother is offering this absurd justification, the authorities take the only appropriate action. They immediately transport the little girl to a medical facility for a comprehensive examination.
Right, to determine the scope of the trauma.
Exactly. And the results of that evaluation are vital to understanding the legal boundaries of the case. Authorities confirmed that the child suffered no physical or sexual violence during the event.
But the French prosecutors were highly explicit in their press briefings that the absence of physical violence does not mean an absence of profound harm. They heavily stressed the severe psychological damage inflicted upon the girl.
The legal framework in France recognizes the profound impact of coercive control. This child was removed from her home country, placed in a highly stressful environment, surrounded by hundreds of strangers in the dark, forced into physically restrictive clothing, and pushed into a deeply confusing adult ritual. The psychological terror of that experience is a quantifiable injury.
Which forces us to analyze the mother's cognitive dissonance again. To rationalize taping heels to your own child's feet for a fake marriage requires a catastrophic failure of the maternal protective instinct.
We have to consider the mechanisms of influence that could warp a parent's judgment so severely. Was she the target of intense manipulation by the groom? Was there a massive financial incentive?
I mean, if a man is willing to burn $150,000 on a venue, it is high.
Regardless of the incentive, whether it was desperation or manipulation, she chose to suppress the glaring instinctual danger to her child. She adopted the predator's narrative to protect herself from the reality of what she was facilitating. It's a chilling demonstration of how easily a guardian's protocols can be overridden when extreme pressure or wealth is applied.
The mother's delusion is infuriating, but it takes on a whole new level of terror when the police finally wipe the makeup off the groom and realize exactly who they just arrested.
Yes, he's sitting in the interrogation room, still clinging to his fabricated identity. He insists he's a Latvian filmmaker. He's got the forged paperwork right there. But the booking process requires a physical reality check.
The police literally wipe away the thick layers of theatrical contouring and structural makeup.
And as the physical illusion is stripped away, the digital illusion collapses right alongside it. The authorities run his actual biometrics, his fingerprints and facial recognition through Interpol and European networks. And the system registers a massive hit.
The man in custody is not a 22-year-old from Latvia. His real name is Jaskern Jackie Chaj, and he is a 39-year-old British national.
And the revelation of his true identity instantly upgrades this from corporate fraud to an international emergency. Jackie Chaj is a registered sex offender in the United Kingdom.
In 2016, Jaj was convicted of sexual activity with two 15-year-old girls. He is a documented, convicted predator.
Furthermore, he wasn't just living quietly off the grid. At the exact moment he was standing in front of Sleeping Beauty's castle, he was an internationally wanted fugitive. The Metropolitan Police in London had an active warrant out for his arrest.
He was wanted for explicitly breaching a sexual harm prevention order and for failing to comply with the mandated notification requirements of the UK Sex Offender Registry.
He had managed to flee his jurisdiction, cross international borders, and funnel massive amounts of capital into staging a highly visible fantasy, all while actively evading law enforcement.
And as the French police dig deeper into the mechanics of his fraud, they uncover a detail that connects this entire sprawling conspiracy right back to the very man who stopped it.
Investigators are examining the forged British passport that Jaj's team used to bypass the corporate security checks. They show this forged document to Vitalis, the paratrooper, to see if he recognizes the alias.
Vitalis doesn't just recognize the alias, he recognizes the photograph. The face on the fake passport is his own.
Shaj's operation had literally stolen the biometric identity of the whistleblower.
It is an astronomical coincidence.
Vitalis explains to the police that during the recruitment process, a woman in Riga, part of Jaj's network, had requested a clear photograph of him, claiming it was for a Disneyland vendor pass. They harvested his facial data under the guise of paperwork and used it to forge the central identity document.
They built their Trojan horse using the face of the man who would eventually burn it down. The legal consequences for this entire operation are devastating. Chaj is brought before an investigative judge in the jurisdiction of Mo. He is officially charged with money laundering, identity theft, fraud, breach of trust, and the corruption of a minor.
And Disney is not quietly sweeping this under the rug. They filed their own aggressive legal complaints against him, targeting the elaborate deception and the use of forged documents to infiltrate their property.
When you lay all the pieces out, the 130,000 euros, the international logistics, the harvested biometric data, the Hollywood makeup, the manipulation of bureaucracy, it forces a deeply uncomfortable realization. If it weren't for the moral compass of one single individual who refused to succumb to the bystander effect, he would have succeeded.
Which leaves us with a chilling extrapolation. If an internationally wanted fugitive possesses the capital to launder that much money, hire an army of actors, and hijack one of the most highly monitored corporate landmarks on the planet for a twisted psychological exercise, what is happening in the private, unmonitored spaces of the world? How many seemingly legitimate exclusive events occurring behind heavily guarded closed doors are nothing more than well-funded covers for exploitation?
All right, if we made your drive, your workout, or your downtime even a little bit better today, do us a massive favor. Whether you were watching on YouTube, streaming on Spotify, listening on Apple Podcasts, or literally anywhere else, hit that follow or subscribe button right now. We drop episodes like this frequently, bringing you the most fascinating cases in the most interesting way possible. Lock in, because you do not want to miss the crazy mysteries we have queued up for next time. See you then.